human enemy, the heart attack.
You mentioned diabetes, and do you think we can cure it?
The short answer to your question is Tom Brady, cloned a new dog.
Correct.
So could I clone another Nirmal?
If you actually look at obesity, go back to 1950s, 1960s, even 2010 or 2000, the obesity wasn't a problem.
It wasn't.
So if we think it's all genetics, I disagree with that.
I think companies very early figured out what we're genetically predisposed to liking. So a lot of the food became addictive
Yes,
because they hacked the body.
the Indian kids are born thinner. So we have less muscle mass. That's genetic. You can't change that. We don't put our kids in gym at 2 years of age. Where in US, my secretary, who does not have any money, takes her kids to swimming lessons at age 4 months.
The question is, we live longer, we are fitter. Is this the healthiest humans have been?
Chronic diseases, right? Diabetes, blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, what have you. And there's clear data to suggest that as we evolved, those things, we began to die less and less of infectious diseases. The water is safer, everything else is better. So I don't die in the first year, I don't die in the first 5 years. So I'm now living longer. But now to your question, am I living healthier? And the answer is a big no.
If you took Ozempic and Manjaro, it decreases your appetite. Once you stop the drug, the weight just comes right back because you haven't changed that lifestyle.
Speaking of AI, do you think medicine and doctors and experts is going to be reserved for the rich?
I have gone to research-based engines and looked at the highest available new data, and at least 30% of the time I'm off.
What was COVID? Why did we panic?
From a public health standpoint, that's where people felt they were misled. How can you trust the information? I say don't trust.
When I was seeing the documentary, The Brown Heart, that you guys did, a thought kept occurring to me. Because I think I felt something that you guys were getting at is that there are genetic differences between people of the subcontinent and maybe the races, elsewhere, North America, Europe, and so on and so forth. And it's very interesting because we've always been taught we're all the same, we're all the same, we're all the same. And so my question to you is, are we all the same? And do we kind of get a little, draw the short end of the genetic stick, so to speak?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that. I think it's a very interesting question because one thing is clear. Over the years, for example, when Renu and I went to medical school, both teaching as well as conventional wisdom was that disease states, right, are based in either genetics or the environment or a combo of those two, right? So it's been well known that people have different genetic predisposition to disease. It's non-question, never question that that's the case. And more over the years, what has happened is that has been what I would call substratified, meaning at a genetic level, you can say Indians, for example, are more prone to X, Y, or Z. But when you kind of break that down, even within Indians, is there a difference in the genetic makeup of someone from the north versus someone from the south, as an example? And then if you were to take that one step further down, and that's the broad domain of what's called precision medicine, which is now, okay, is Rushank himself, based on not only his genetic makeup, but based on a whole variety of other things, is his liver making a certain kind of enzyme that if Rushank were to smoke, he'll get away with it, but if Nirmal smoked, he would not get away with it. Secondly, along those same lines, if you begin to look very carefully at more details of precision medicine, you're able to say, okay, maybe Rushank will not tolerate this blood pressure medicine or will not be affected as much by this blood pressure medicine, but Renu will do beautifully with this blood pressure medicine. So the short answer to your question is there is a very strong genetic predisposition to disease states and how we process things that come to us from the environment. And I'll just add one thing to that before we sort of move on, which is, while that's true, there is another sort of very strong component of this, which is then when you, in the framework that I described for you, you then begin to look at, can you modify the ultimate outcome of a disease, even though you're born So in the context of heart disease, Indians have clearly defined predisposition to get more heart disease than their Western counterparts.
This is what Harvard researchers showed.
Sure.
We interviewed them that each one of us have small mutations, and then together that mutation make a score, and we call it the polygenic risk score. So what they have found, and they've only done studies on South Asians, which is one of the beautiful studies I've done recently, that if you are on that top 10th percentile of that score, which means you have so much genetic mutation, you have a higher risk of heart disease. But by the same token, they did a study that showed if you follow a healthy lifestyle, even if you are genetically different, you actually can move your risk to the lower genetic risk by just changing lifestyle. So yes, genes contribute, but I wouldn't say 100%.
No, but I think I'm gonna even the definition of a healthy lifestyle. I'm gonna maybe ask this question in a slightly different way. Though you guys have answered it. It's always been told to us, right, that everybody's equal, and what we're kind of hearing is that no, there are differences, which
Yes.
in many ways we knew, right? Like growing up, I could do certain things my brother couldn't, or vice versa, and it's both so studying and learning things and memory and
Yes.
disease and fitness and so on and so forth. But I think I think sometimes maybe people are scared to say there's genetic differences because that can be misused,
Yes.
as it has been in the history of the world. You know, that has been misused to say some people are better or not worse. But this is interesting because even the definition of healthy lifestyle then will depend very much on who I am and the genes I have. And so how do you as doctors or as researchers, and since you've spoken to so many people, how do you kind of, or is that a fear you guys have, which is that this can then be misused?
Yes.
I mean, we're hearing even about specific kind of weaponry that will then, only attack people with a certain gene set or a certain mutation. And there's been TV shows about it. As once that kind of stuff sort of enters the zeitgeist, people find a way to do it. So is that something you guys are very careful of, or?
I think that's our biggest fear, because what people think is, oh, I have this genes, no matter what I do, either I'm going to get heart disease or I'm going to get diabetes or I'm going to get this blood pressure. So why should I care about?
Yeah.
Right? I don't want people to have that fear and think about it that I don't want to do anything. Because I believe, and again, healthy lifestyle could be very different for somebody. So if I am a person who eats 3,000 calorie diet, a 2,500 is a healthy lifestyle for me.
Okay.
Because I've already gone down 500 calories.
Okay.
So it's all a curve, right? It's not like this way or that way. And we never talk about that. But if on the other hand, if somebody is already doing a 1,500 calorie lifestyle and is still getting a disease, that means going more healthy is not going to help them.
Okay.
Because they're already doing something in their mindset and in their body, what they've done physically. So there's I think it's a curve both ways. It's a bell-shaped curve. So we don't want people to get away saying this is my gene, so I'm not going to do anything about it. This is the only fear we have.
Yeah, but I think fear from the standpoint of what Rushank was describing, I think what he was trying to get at was, well, using this information somehow in a negative connotation.
Negative, because because once information is out there, it can be used the way the guy who knows the information wants to use it, right? And so we've spent so much of the 19th century making sure everybody's equal, that I think it's such a huge change to then come out and say, okay, let me put it differently. Like at school, it was very clear. And I think we've all been very accepting of the fact in two fields, sports and studying, that some people have caps.
Yep.
Right? No matter what I did, I could not have played tennis at a certain level. I just didn't have the hand-eye coordination for it. I just didn't have the aptitude for it. I could not have beaten my brother's scores in certain subjects. It just, but we've never felt that way about health. At least it was always like, oh, if you take care of yourself, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it was, you never, because we didn't have the information. That no matter what you do, even if you have a 1,500 calorie diet, even if you have this, you are predisposed to, and oftentimes you would blame that on God, right?
Well, absolutely.
That guy doesn't
on
drink.
destiny or whatever. And I think there is a part though. See, as healers, as doctors, we look at life through a certain lens of healing, positivity, come what may, I've got to do better with the care of people and so on and so forth. But very interestingly, back to your primary question, which was, can this information be used in a way that is not desirable?
Yeah.
And one thing that, at least in the United States, there is a concern about, which I think anything that starts in the West to begin with, by definition, at some point gets to the Indian context and the Eastern context as well. In this case, it happens to be insurance, health insurance.
Yeah.
So would this information, if I got down to stratifying to this level, would someone say, okay, so Renu's makeup is XYZAB,
Correct.
and therefore XYZAB we are going to exclude or increase the insurance premiums, as an example. That would be a sad situation. And thankfully, most ethical committees, ethical guidelines prevent you from doing that. Although it has been historically done, pre-existing condition used to be, and historically, if you had diabetes, I have a right to raise my premium.
But this is almost like the Minority Report.
Yes.
Which is that you just have a higher percentage of getting diabetes.
Yes.
And then it may almost be that it doesn't matter if you're a healthier lifestyle.
Yes.
Right? Like, your medical kundlis, if you will.
Yes.
Right? Even if you get married and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And this kind of then goes to one of the other questions I've had, not directly connected to the documentary, but once you figure out what does what, then the next step of human evolution has always been to control it.
Yes.
Which is that, can I change it in the womb? Or can I get people married such that the baby is likelier to be less predisposed to illness and stuff like that? And with AI kind of really turbocharging the research process, is that something you feel is the next step of this, which is that we get to control what our genes are so that South Asians won't be South Asian 5 generations in that, we've taken out whatever it is that you guys have figured out gives us 4 times more likely.
Depending on where you come.
4 times more likely. I mean, if I can remove it from my children, wouldn't I? Even if that means they're no longer South Asian?
But then I have a counter to that before you answer that question. As a South Asian genes, yes, if we are more prone to get heart disease in 2 times or 3 times, maybe we have genes, and I'm not an expert on that, which saves us from getting breast cancer. And then we have genes which saves us from getting something else. So why would you want to remove South Asians from your
I'm just saying just that.
So,
just that. Like,
okay,
would
just
you,
that part you're saying.
like I'm saying, once I have figured out what causes a problem, we've been pretty good at solving for that, right? I was reading you're an infectious disease expert, and we can get into that. But once we know what causes infections, we've been pretty good over a X amount of time.
I think it's a wonderful question because it's so thought-provoking. And if you begin to then look at it from a sci-fi angle, right?
Correct.
You look at it from that angle, that could this be that, for example, Tom Brady, cloned a new dog.
Correct.
So could I clone someone, Renu or Nirmal has one thing that I don't like about them. Could I clone another Nirmal that he doesn't have that characteristic, right?
Or if there's such a thing as a perfect genetic code,
yes,
do we all end up looking the same?
Exactly. And I think that's where it's both the realm of science fiction, if you think about it. We, again, back to the lens through which we look at things and life in general, has been more constructive, has been more, what can I do with this that will make humanity better, right? So the way we look at that is in a very health and disease-centric perspective, right? So when we look at it through that lens, it's phenomenally exciting, right? That if I could remove Rushank's risk of heart disease that was 3 times as much, and I can manipulate the gene here to say that risk went away, as long as it's not doing something else weird to you, I'm cool with that, and I can keep going that way because all that can do is maybe increase longevity, maybe increase quality of life. And that's a very healthy and constructive way to look at it. The moment you then begin to veer off that path is when things become very dicey and very weird.
I mean, my instinct is, all of the kind of roads are paved with good intentions, right? I think my instinct is what we'll end up defining as undesirable, we start getting into minute. So the heart attacks or heart disease is such a clear undesirable.
Yes.
But once you fix that, and an example is obesity, right?
Yes.
And so,
or anything else cosmetic.
Cosmetic, right?
Anything cosmetic. I have
Yeah.
a funny eye. I have small boobs, big boobs. I have, big butt, small butt.
Any of them.
I can manipulate any.
Eye color.
Yeah, eye
The
color.
only thing you go with obesity is if you actually look at obesity,
Yeah.
go back to 1950s, 1960s, even 2010 or 2000,
Yeah.
the obesity wasn't a problem.
It wasn't.
It wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
So if we think it's all genetics, I disagree with that. That we are all humanly prone to obesity. No, I think the lifestyle clearly changed between 2000 to 2020. I have to argue both in US and both here. US came first, and then I will tell you the plate size.
Yeah.
When we went in 1985,
Yeah.
the plate size was 7 to 9 inches.
Yeah.
In every restaurant you went to.
Yeah.
Okay. In average restaurant, in US at least, or even I see the same thing here, the plate size has become 12 inches. So you eat more when you have a bigger plate.
Mhm.
So if you have a smaller plate, you're going to eat smaller and less amount. If you have a bigger plate, you'll eat more. So I again counteract the part that genes are there, but we cannot change everything with genes. We still have to focus on our lifestyle.
I 100% agree. It's a small anecdote, but when we were in school, if you had something in your tiffin that everyone liked,
Yeah.
if you didn't eat it fast, it was gone.
Yeah.
And so I became a very fast eater because my mom made something I liked. You kind of had to eat it really quickly. And the other thing was because we've grown up saying don't waste food,
Yes.
I would finish whatever was on my plate.
Yep.
Because I am mentally conditioned for that. And it took me years, I would say maybe only 3 or 4 years ago, where I realized I don't need to do that. And I can eat less and still be filled, But to your point, I think one of the reasons we are unhealthy is because I think companies very early figured out what we're genetically predisposed to liking. So sugar, the sugar highs and so on and so forth. And so a lot of the food became addictive
Yes.
because they hacked the body.
Yeah.
Salt and sugar and all these kind of things, right? So I don't know why I just can't eat one chip, but it's very clear the company was aware I can't just eat one chip.
Yes.
Because they're kind of designed the product that way. And so, that I think we're all so far behind as individuals. Organizations have so much more information on what we like and what we don't like, that it's a fight that I don't know if we can fight it without having information. So as we get more and more information, I try to avoid eating certain foods because I know what they do to my mind and what they do to my body.
But also one more thing,
Yeah.
I think, again, when we talk about ancient medicine,
Yeah.
and I'm going back
Sure.
4,000 years
Yeah.
now, right? I don't know if you wanted to go this way, but at least I will tell you, what was ancient medicine? Why were we healthier?
Yeah.
We ate homemade food.
Uh-huh.
We walked everywhere. As a child, we didn't have a car. So I walked to school. I walked to every place. And we didn't have money to buy paneer and Coke every day. So we made homemade food, which was simple, a simple dal and roti and sugar rush. And that's what we ate, right? So the two things were, and life was much more simpler. One of the doctor who we interviewed actually told us that when people move from villages to the cities, which is evolution, and it's a great thing, we should do it because it's important for us to make more money. And one of the things that changed was the females started to work because they couldn't afford the food on the table if one person was working, which is very different than what we lived before 200 years ago.
Yeah.
So when two people are working, and again, nothing wrong with that, who puts the food on the table? So that's why the whole industry of eating outside food increased because we can make at home. So where are we getting the good from? We're going to get food from outside. And their goal is not to feed you healthy food. Their goal is to make the food which you love.
Of course.
And that has been a big change over the last 50 years in India, because more people have migrated from villages to cities.
Correct.
And in Delhi, at least, that's what we learned. It has caused the rising of obesity like this.
So the other
Again, going away from
So
genetics.
the others, I'm just going to go back to your 4,000 years ago. And another thing that you mentioned that I always find. So you said you're healers and doctors.
Yes.
And those to at least in the common public, those are often not the same thing. Are we healthier? And so, the question is, we live longer, we are fitter. And if you really look at mortality, infant mortality, life expectancy 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, is that just glorified? like if the knowledge that I have now,
Yes.
I would hope I am healthier than my grandparents or their grandparents and stuff like that. And this is even just forgetting for a second colonization and sort of our lack of resources, which also you guys mentioned that the Indian bodies almost evolved to store food because we didn't have enough food over generations, and we'll come to that. But just that point that you made here. When have we been healthy? Is this the healthiest as a general time? Like, is this the healthiest humans have been, or was that years ago?
No, I don't think it's interesting. I think what Renu was describing
Yeah.
was what I call broadly the one of the reasons for what we call chronic diseases, right? Diabetes, blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, what have you. And there's clear data to suggest that as we evolved, those things, we began to die less and less of infectious diseases, cholera, parasitic diseases. When we were growing up, polio, those were prevalent and those killed people before the age of 5, typically before they were 1.
I mean, so they never had a chance to develop diabetes.
I mean, that's
like I've had a couple of diseases, that I may not have, what I mean? Like
May not have
certain
survived.
types of malaria or, hepatitis.
Yes.
And so,
So back to the question that, however, even if you accounted for infant mortality,
okay.
that was high.
Yeah.
People were done by age, whatever the average life expectancy 30 years ago was 58 in India. So by 58, you were done, you were out the door. There was no chance to develop chronic disease.
Correct.
But while you were there, while you were playing ball for those 58 years, you were practicing somewhat more healthful behaviors because you were walking and so on.
Yeah.
So today, the whole concept has then shifted to not only am I not practicing healthful behaviors, but my infectious diseases are gone. The water is safer, everything else is better. So I don't die in the first year, I don't die in the first 5 years. But many of these other things are now, and there are beautiful medications that control my blood pressure better, that control my diabetes better. So I'm now living longer. But now to your question, am I living healthier? And the answer is a big no. We are not. But we are living with these diseases, and what's beginning to happen more and more, which Renu and I have seen firsthand in the US, and it's depressing, which is between the ages of 60 and 90, there are miserable lives, right? Multiple chronic diseases. I have an amputated leg. I'm demented. I'm sitting in a nursing home, which very similar things are happening here in India right now. So the last, what I call, which is the subject of a beautiful book called Outlive, you've probably seen that, is that how do we then change this so that it's not just the length of life that's important, but the last 2 decades of life, how can we make that better?
And does your instinct make you believe that's a lifestyle problem or that's an engineering problem? That is to say, given enough time, and I'd like to use that opportunity to come to something like Ozempic or Mounjaro,
Yes.
right? That given enough money and time, we'll figure out a way to be lazy and healthy.
It's actually both. It's very interesting because Renu and I talk about this philosophically all the time. Because if you think about it, these are connected. All that you mentioned about effective marketing. So there are social forces that I have Zomato wanting to make money. And entrepreneurially, a great thing. That's what drives wealth, drives people doing better and so on. So all of these influences are not exactly helping a healthy lifestyle. They're actually making lifestyle remarkably unhealthy. And there is no question that there is actually published data. If you looked at all chronic diseases, the big ones being diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, and obesity, all of them, 80% of them are considered to be straight lifestyle based. Right? So the vast majority of them. Then the more complex
And the fatty
question-
liver, which
and
is so
fatty
much
liver.
more common here nowadays.
Yeah, that I think, and I partly playing devil's advocate, but also something that I believe. I think in the Indian context, the access to Zomato, the access to, I think in many ways we've gotten the 100 years of Western life
Yes.
in 5 years.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
So we got 3 years of the junk food, but we also got the Indian government now coming out with protein powder.
Yes.
right? And my Zomato or my Swiggy or whatever has high protein options
Very
and things like that.
Right.
And I'm well aware now
Yes.
that we were discussing this offline, having pizza on a sourdough base
Yes.
is probably significantly healthier than lacha paratha and paneer makhani. And significantly so.
Yes. Yes.
Which I just don't think my parents knew that.
Yes.
Even if they wanted me to be healthy, the instinct would have been pizza is unhealthy, paneer makhani is healthy,
Yes.
regardless of the cashews and the butter and so on and so forth. So, I'm a little hopeful on that front, which is that in the Indian context, access to the kind of research you guys are doing, access to the kind of availability of food and protein powder and protein shakes and just knowledge should make us healthier going forward. Then, because I think the way we were living 50 years ago, 30 years ago was just not sustainable.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the fatty livers and stuff comes from there, which is, you have gulab jamun at the end of every
Yes.
meal.
Yes.
And you have, inordinate amounts of ghee and sort of just.
But I have a
yeah.
question about that.
Yeah.
80% of India, or make it 70% now, or 60%, is still in the far villages, right?
Yeah.
In the villages of the country. And the top 20%, in my opinion, are becoming much more healthier. And I see that wave. And I love wherever we have given the talks, we're seeing people are healthier.
Yeah.
We didn't find obese people. We didn't find people, in one place in the bar, there were 3 people out of 45, which to me was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the other place, they didn't serve alcohol.
Yeah.
0. So I think those things were phenomenal.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. But the problem is still, how do you get to the masses? And to me, that's a bigger problem unless you make things cheaper, unless the protein powder becomes cheap and it's available to every school-going kid.
Yeah.
They're still going to eat gulab jamun. They're still going to eat rice. They're still going to eat the wrong things, right? So how do we make that happen is an equally important topic.
And I think that's what you guys are doing, what everybody's doing in education is actually so useful. So even if you just read the forums,
Yes.
anything Amul makes with protein is perpetually sold out. So the protein lassi is and there's
Very
people
nice.
complaining saying we just can't get enough of it.
Okay.
It's just not available because it's sold out.
Wow.
And so again, I think because we've managed to constrict that entire Western education in 5 years, which is we have internet now. So even the 80% have access to that information.
Yep.
An ability to attack that information, which is
See,
all
my
nice.
take, though slightly different, is this is observational. So please, by all
course,
means,
yeah.
push back if you think this is not true. My observation is similar to what Renu was, where she was going, was that there is a strata of our society, and we are disproportionately, Renu and I right now, are disproportionately accessing them
Sure.
because they have remarkable influence
Yeah.
among
Yeah.
the larger swath of society,
Yeah.
right? So I'm perfectly comfortable accessing
Yeah.
them and saying, hey, talk about this.
Yeah.
Hey, talk to your, owner of X, Y, and Z company.
Yeah.
Talk to 2,500 of your employees. Because Renu and our goal is, if I can touch 1 million people through the Brown Heart Initiative and therefore through healthy lifestyle overall,
Yeah.
if 1 million people hear the message, and if 10% decide to do something, we would have saved about 1,000 lives, right? So,
And it's because you have access to the brown heart.
because we have access to it.
I'm saying even that 80% of the person, if enough people talk to them,
Yes.
they have the ability to now go on YouTube or Hotstar or
Exactly. Exactly.
and-
Because we have made it free. So people can watch.
So people can watch it.
Yeah.
That being said, where I was going was that I still believe the struggle is both of our families, right? We have roots here and we've pretty much grown up here. So we know the pulse of the people even today. Because once you've grown up here 20 years, 25 years, you know exactly what goes on down in the
And we come visit them every year.
and we come visit. So I'm finding people who are our family members who are not that well off, right? They can't even look me in the eye. They go, "Theek hai, bol raha hai, bata raha hai," but it's not. It's their life is. Subah 8, 6 baje nikalna hai ghar se. I'm on a scooter with a helmet.
Yeah.
I have to go 2 hours for a commute to outside of Delhi, and I live outside of Delhi, and I travel to Delhi. And he has a 12-hour day. He eats whatever the heck he can lay his hands on.
Yeah.
He's obese. He has liver disease.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the person who's dropping dead in the
what,
next
5,
5
10
years. And I'm so worried about that. I'm saying to myself, you know what? I have literally gotten people by the neck saying, you're going to do a Zoom call with me in the next 2 days, and I'm going to walk you through every lab test you've had done.
Yeah.
And then they go 30 days later when I say, did you do something? they look at me like, they can't look me in the eye.
My hope is that's generational.
Yep.
And my hope is that if you can start those habits younger,
Yes.
then they stick.
Then they
Starting before school, like school time.
As young as you can.
As
Like
young as you
for
can.
me, it
Exactly.
started, I would say, I'm sorry, so like 32, 33
there you
is
go.
when I started learning about the differences.
Mhm.
And I would say 35, 36 as I got older, maybe a couple more injuries, maybe your body can't, wake
Yes.
up the same way.
Yes.
You start taking that seriously, right? But for my kids, it's now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for some of the domestic help that works at a house,
Yes.
for their kids is now as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because we talk to them, they talk to them, and they're like, okay, even if you guys have lived a certain way, because it's tough at 45 or 55. So I do have that hope that
Absolutely. That's what we do too.
So one
I-
of the thing I think that might help, and this was a beautiful research for 50 years now. Dr. Yajnik in Pune has done that. And what he did was he measured European kids and Indian kids, and he found that the Indian kids are born thinner. So we have less muscle mass,
Yeah.
and that's genetic. You can't change that. We also have more fat in our belly when we are born.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, right? We have more fat and less mass. But the other lifestyle, where I was connecting the two, we don't put our kids in gym at 2 years of age. Where in US, my secretary, who does not have any money,
Yeah.
takes her kids to swimming lessons at age 4 months.
Yeah.
Very cheap, right? Simple things you can do. So if we start exercise and the healthier lifestyle
Yeah.
much earlier, you will build more muscle mass, and that lowers your insulin resistance, that lowers your insulin, increases your insulin sensitivity, and that is one hallmark for PCOS, for gestational diabetes, high blood pressure, you name it.
For all of it. And
All of it.
there, I think you guys are right, because if you're privileged in India, you have access to all of that.
Yes.
So you have access because you have to pay for everything.
But exercise, everybody has access to. You can run in the crowd.
There's just not enough open spaces.
Yes, true. Yeah.
And I think
Exactly
that's the challenge.
Yes.
Which is that I pay a significant, my daughter is 8, I pay a significant amount of money for all of her classes, and it just adds up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is something we can do better. And I think people are trying, but I think that is something from an open spaces standpoint
Yes. That's a very good point.
that
Yeah.
that we must do better, we can do better. So it's not just protein, but also,
Absolutely.
I'll give you a very small example. I have a friend, he used to live with, he moved to South Africa. His son is 8, my daughter is 8. 4 years ago, obviously they were 4. And part of his curriculum is, can you do the monkey bars?
Yes.
You don't get, you don't move from standard X to Y.
Yeah.
If you, and my daughter, there's no access. Like, that's not part of the curriculum of my
It's just not
daughters,
there.
right?
Yep.
And so she does math significantly better than him.
Yes.
And he can do the monkey bars.
Yes.
And they get to meet each other, so they learn, so they both try to do both, but not everybody has access to that. The other thing is, obviously, in the Indian context, and I would give you guys as an example, for the betterment of your families, which is also something a parent thinks about. The guy doing the 2-hour commute is, so much of it is for the family.
Yes.
That's how we're brought up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think going back, you would sacrifice fitness
Yes.
to be doctors,
To be
so that your children
Mhm.
can be fitter.
Can be fitter. Yes.
Right? Like, I am fitter than my dad because my dad spent an inordinate amount of time building an organization,
Yes. Yes.
14, 15-hour days, eating whatever he could find,
He could find. Yep.
multiple cups of coffee,
Yep.
which now, by the way, has become green tea. Small steps.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, part of it is just, we, as a country, the priorities were survival
Yes.
and earning.
No doubt. No
And the fact that we focused on education
Mhm.
over fitness,
doubt. Yes.
net is, I think it's a decision we would make again 50 years ago.
And it's a good one. It's a very good one.
I don't think we have an option.
No.
I don't think we have the option that the Australians do
Yeah.
or the Europeans do, which is, we'll leave work at 5. And, because, there was no colonial wealth that we had
Yep.
built up. And so some of that is just unfortunate.
It is what it is. And I
Yeah.
think these things are never binary, this or that. They
Yeah.
happen together. And they are the murkiness of life in general. That's how it works.
So the hope is, as we get up per capita,
Yeah.
and to your point, I don't know how quickly we could reach the lower per capita people.
Yes.
But overall, as long as everyone goes up per capita, you hope more people get fitter. And,
But I think the simple thing, like we're talking, as you were saying, if we're talking to influential people, each company, like the company we spoke in Pune, has 12,000 employees.
yeah,
So all I asked them was, it's a cheap diabetes and lipid test is a very cheap
Sure.
test. Literally costs you 100 rupees.
Yeah.
Bring a lab person in your company, have everybody do it.
Yeah.
That's it. You're saving them time. Or give 1 hour, tell them you don't have to work, show them the documentary. Even if 10% would benefit, they will still change. And minor changes. I'm not saying you have to tweak everything. Like this guy, he's my cousin. He's 35 years old and he's obese.
Yeah.
So the way I tell them, you want to be there for your son's wedding or not?
Correct.
So you don't make change. Yes, you have 2 kids who are 4 and 6 years old. You're not going to be living long enough, unfortunately.
And how do you guys, and speaking of people like that, right? Where does stress come into all of this?
Huge.
Because, how do you explain sort of incredibly unfit people living well into their 90s? And so what happens is sometimes anecdotes frustrate you,
Yes.
right? You see people that go to, so then you hear, he was having so much protein powder. That's why a young 40-year-old passed away and he was too much in the gym.
Yeah.
Whereas look at that guy, he's enjoying, he's having his gulab jamun, he's 80 and he's happy and he's fit, And it's obviously so much of this is anecdotal. But there are anecdotes.
Oh, there are plenty of anecdotes. In
Yeah.
fact, when Renu and I were making the
Yeah.
film, we gave it a term. It's called the Uncle G effect,
Correct.
right? So you could people कहते देखो यार खा पी के इतना सब 90 साल का मरा वो, he was eating, drinking, दारू पी रहा था, he was having a great time. And look at me, I'm doing everything right, or my brother passed away at X.
Or
age.
I don't smoke, but I
But I
got
don't
cancer,
smoke, but I get into
all that.
And what we tell people is that if you just forget destiny, forget
Yeah.
the one up there, all of that is true. But if you just simply took hard, cold numbers, right? And you put everyone on the planet on a bell-shaped curve, on a curve, it would be like a bell-shaped curve. This end of the spectrum, a certain percentage, will get fat, will get diseases, will get bad stuff happen to them, even if they smell food, right? While this end of the spectrum, a certain percentage of people will get away with murder. They'll eat, drink, be merry, nothing will happen to them, they'll be to the 90s. But most of us operate in the middle of the bell-shaped curve. So the vast majority of us can actually shift things within that middle.
But that was my question. So do you think medication and stuff like Ozempic, and I would love to sort of put your head on that,
Through that.
will have most of us money permitting in that section of the
No.
bell-shaped curve?
The answer is probably no. And the reason is, once again, I go back to lifestyle.
Yeah.
So if you took Ozempic and Mounjaro, I do this for a living. I'm a diabetologist and obesity specialist, so that's what I do for life. And I write probably 3 prescriptions a day for these drugs.
Okay.
I have no stock in drug company, but
Okay.
unfortunately, if you have a BMI of 35, 40, you're so obese. So the first thing is lifestyle. And you've given enough lifestyle. You've gone to 1500 calorie diet. You're exercising 200 minutes a week. And you've given up your stressful life. You're sleeping well. But you just can't shed your weight. Maybe it's your genetics. But 90% of the time, I don't find genetics. The parents are not obese, which is a different thing, right?
Okay.
So they're obese because somewhat of a lifestyle. But they have given lifestyle enough chance. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. And now they're sick and tired because they have PCOS, right? So that is a genetic component and they can't change that. That's when these drugs come into picture. So I start them on these drugs. And not just that, I start them on metformin, which is a time-tested drug, cheap, 5 rupees drug, and that has great benefit. But if they don't respond to that, we go to these lifestyle-changing drugs. And what they do is they actually build up your own incretin hormones from your body. So you have these 3 hormones your body builds. And as you get older, the hormones start to decline. And in diabetics, that declines even faster.
Okay.
So these drugs, one of them is the Ozempic, just stimulates 1.
Okay.
Mounjaro stimulates 2.
Okay.
And the third one coming out this year stimulates all 3.
Okay.
And that is why the weight loss difference is huge. The first one drops 20 pounds average. The second one drops 25 to 30 pounds. The third one is going to drop 50 pounds, which is 25
Does it make you
kilos.
healthier?
So if you drop weight very quickly,
Yeah.
no. The reason is because 30% of your weight loss is going to be muscle mass.
Okay.
So you're losing fatty tissue, which is healthier, but you're also losing 30% of your muscle mass. And that's going to go back to the same problem. You have your insulin problem and the whole thing. And muscle mass is important. So what we tell people is we start very slowly, very, very lower amount, and increase it very slowly. So I'm not changing them from here to here in 2 months. I may change them from here to here in 1 year. A very slow increase. Second part, you have to have a protein, 1.2 gram per kg body weight or what, good amount of protein, and you have to start strength training, especially for females even more.
Yeah.
Strength training 3 days a week. If you're not going to do that, I'm not going to put you on these medications. So what is the good part about them is they are great for improving heart attack. There is data.
They're great for improving heart health? Did you say?
Great for improving
Okay.
heart health.
Okay.
They have actually shown almost a 20% decline in heart attacks, 20 to 30% risk of dying from heart attack. And that's huge.
This is for obese people.
This is for obese people,
Okay.
for anybody who's taking Ozempic.
Okay.
Because you can't even take these medication unless your BMI is about 29 in US or above 30 and above 27 here. So that is important. I don't want to put every single soul on Ozempic, like Oprah Winfrey says. No, don't go that route.
Okay.
But if you have real obesity and you're not able to lose it with making enough lifestyle changes, so 2 principles: start very slow,
Okay.
go very slow, do
Okay.
strength training and muscle and exercise, and start losing weight maybe no more than 4 pounds or 6 pounds in 2 months. Very slow. So that will change something because it decreases your appetite, you eat less. And my hope for those people is because their appetite has suppressed, hopefully, they'll continue that lifestyle. But the data is showing otherwise, that once you go quickly, you drop that weight very rapidly. Once you stop the weight, once you stop the drug, the weight just comes right back because you haven't changed that lifestyle. So don't do anything rapid. The heart data is very, very strong. They are great drugs to improve stroke. And stroke is even more important in Indian context than
Correct.
heart disease.
Correct.
So there is wonderful data over 10 years, not just 1 year. So people say bad things about them, but there's good and bad both. The bad thing is muscle loss, which is important. But the good thing is heart attack saving.
So I'm going to spend a little more time on
Yes,
this.
absolutely.
So you said that it's 10 years of data.
Mhm.
How? Aren't these new drugs? How do we have 10 years of data
The research has been going on for 10 years.
on these
yes,
drugs?
of course.
And, obviously, from whatever we read, the weight loss seemed to be a side effect, a good side effect, but I don't think they were in the drugs.
When the first time Ozempic was discovered, it was an accidental discovery.
Correct.
From a Gila monster. And that's how they came into play. And when they saw the weight loss and people are getting obese by the day, I think they thought it may be a good thing. And that's when the research started. So research, actually, I was talking about it in 2015.
Okay.
Really? Yeah.
And, so, and we've heard the same again anecdotally. I've not read any research, is that, once you leave this, you kind of, you're in.
The effect goes away.
Statin is the same in a sense, right? That's why a lot of people are afraid to get onto that. Speaking of heart health, how do you guys as doctors, but also something you've always said is that you look at things holistically, as healers.
Yes.
And that's how I differentiate between the doctor and a healer in my head, which is that, doctors who are my friends may tell me not to take a certain medicine.
Yes.
Or that, you don't need it, just be sick for 2 days. It's fine.
Yep.
Don't take the antibiotic.
Yep.
Right. And this is my own definition.
Yes.
But I think of that person as someone with an MD, with a degree,
Yes.
but more of a healer.
Yes.
Yep.
Which is he's giving me the pros and cons. So if I have a podcast or if I have a
Yes.
conference, take the antibiotic, go. But if you can just rest for 2 days,
Yes.
that's better.
Yes.
From that perspective, how do you deal with drugs that then you have to take for your whole life?
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, that's a huge, I'd say dilemma is the right word, right?
Uh-huh.
The dilemma is the following, is I always tell people, the more dogmatic you are, the more likely you are wrong, right? So if I say, Rushank, I figured it out, you've got to do this, odds are high that I'm either not a good scientist or I'm not a good physician, because if I'm that dogmatic about something, then that's not how the human body works. The human body, we are just skimming the surface, learning about the human body. So that's the contextual framework.
Yeah.
Against that humble contextual framework, now whatever I say, it's against that framework, right?
Yeah.
So now with that framework, now when you begin to look at things, I look at things like a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So this end of the spectrum that's where I consider heart disease and people, South Asians, dying from heart disease, which is if I have 35 and 40-year-olds dying of heart disease, And I have about 15 to 20 years worth of data that we call level 1 evidence. Level 1 evidence means high quality randomized controlled trials of the highest level, showing that if you lowered your LDL in decrements of 10 and 20 points, that you are going to get less heart attacks. And I already know that people are dying of heart attacks every single day in India and across the world who are South Asian, right? I look at data then, I call this at this end of the spectrum. So I'll be much more dogmatic with you to say, Rushank, if your LDL is over 100, please, please, please start a statin unless you want to tell me that I want to try something natural, whatever that is, for a certain amount of time. I'd say go for it. Spend 6 months doing it, spend 12 months even doing it. But the ultimate test, based on my best available knowledge today, this may change, available today over the last 20 years is, if your LDL is consistently above 100 at that point, odds are high, never perfect, never 100%, but odds are high that you're going to get a heart disease.
How do I trust you?
Yeah.
Right. I don't mean you guys specifically, but I'm just
Yeah, of course.
in
Great
general.
question. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yes.
Right. As a very famous thing, if you believe in every conspiracy theory or not, if you believe in none, that's something I judge you for as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is a pharma industrial complex.
Yeah, yes.
Right. There is tremendous money to be made
Yes.
from selling medicine.
Yes.
The thing that blew my mind was, because I never believed in it, was that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And then when I did a lot of research on it, it's tenuous at best,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a study by the cereal people.
Yeah.
Cereal itself,
Yeah.
considered healthy when I was growing up.
Yes.
We can get into that. But coming to the LDL point, because I have a point,
Yeah, absolutely.
is the definitions of this change so often.
Mhm.
How much cholesterol is good, how much cholesterol is bad. Is cholesterol good or bad? Right? I just read a couple of studies that, net actually cholesterol won't kill you. Again, I don't know the veracity of the study, so it's not something that I'm dogmatic about. I don't have the knowledge of it, but it's just, there's always the fear that when you start irreversible things, and Ozempic Mounjaro, part of it is aesthetic, so I'm leaving the aesthetic out of it for a second.
Yes.
If someone just wants to look thinner, be thinner, if they're
I don't
obese,
give it to them for that.
yeah,
reason.
but I'm saying if they decide to take it knowing the risks, because it's, we all, I take a significant amount of risk in my job,
Yes.
because I travel by car a lot. Some people fly a lot.
Yes.
Economy.
Taking risks.
Some jobs are doctors, high stress, life and death all the time, right? And so some people just may need to look good for what they do.
Yeah.
And almost everything we do, I feel, has a certain risk. So generally adults take their own call, but just ignoring them, right? Should I start on statin or should I start on Mounjaro? And I'm leaving the super edge cases out. Super high cholesterol, very obese. I think it's an easy decision for them, life and death. When you may tell me 5 years from now, actually we're fine. That level is actually not bad or not good.
Absolutely.
But now I'm on this drug, on this cycle. And speaking of dogmatic, again, as new information comes in, like the COVID vaccine, and I know you're an infectious disease expert, and even as someone super pro-vaccine, that was, that shook me a little bit.
Yeah.
Just the controversy around that, the kind of information that we were given, kind of the information that came out. So how do we kind of create a more trustworthy?
Absolutely. I think it's
So
a wonderful,
take
it's
from
a wonderful
the
question.
Lipitor question and then
Actually, I'll take the Lipitor or the statin one first, but the fundamental answer is the same. So I'll use both of them as illustrative examples to answer the root question.
How can we trust the
How
information?
can you trust the information? And this is kind of what Renu and I are doing right now. So what we are doing is, I say don't trust it, right? Meaning, I say, you are the CEO of your own body. I'm not. I shouldn't be I should be guiding you what to do. You should be deciding what to do, right? You're the boss. By that I mean, one of the things Renu and I have now done after the Brown Heart got started, we started a WhatsApp group because all the bad stuff was happening on WhatsApp. all these
WhatsApp
guys
University,
Yeah.
we call it.
were throwing things in there, and even some of our doctor colleagues were forwarding that stuff. And I'm saying to myself, if I'm not rebutting it, it might as well be considered true. So I need to be in that space. I need to play in that pond or that sandbox to be able to say wrong, and this is why, right? So we started right after Brown Heart. We started a WhatsApp group that yesterday is full now to 1,024 members. And we get questions like this every single day. We open it up once a week. We get all these questions every single day. So one of the things we have been doing as part of that group answers your question, which is to say, don't trust me, but here's the data, right? Look up the data yourself and become smart consumers, because you need to today with ChatGPT, Gemini, with all of the AI-based data is
Evidence
easy to get. You should know how to interpret a study. So what I do in part is teaching you how to fish as opposed to giving you the fish. So for example, I need to be able to tell you so there is this one guy who sends me these misinformation articles all the time saying, see, cholesterol doesn't matter. All these people were great. They're not dying and all of this. So then I would go back, post that article on the forum and say, this is why this is misinformation. What did you look at? A, was it drug company funded? Then you have to look at it with a grain of salt. Number two, how big was the data? Was it randomized control or was it just an N of 2?
Yeah.
Right? And so on and so forth. So you get the drift. Meaning, what we are now beginning to do is to say, we're going to teach people how to fish rather than just telling them, here's a platter, start Lipitor. And once people get smart with that, Rushank, I believe they will understand that science, by definition, there is nothing wrong in the target changing in 5 years. Because if I told you studies are great today and that's how it's going to be for the rest of civilization and rest of life, I'm lying to you, because that's not how science works. So science works by A, what is the quality of evidence today? That's the best I can tell you. That's my limitation. That's the best I can tell you. But now back to joining this dot with the original dot on this end of the spectrum where people are dying we are seeing them in the hospital. No, none of the Ayurvedic providers are seeing these patients in the hospital in the ICU,
Yeah.
right? So we are seeing them in the ICU dying of heart disease, and we are saying this guy could have been saved if 5 years ago his LDL had been dropped from 160 to less than 100. I know from level 1 evidence that's the case, and he didn't do any of it.
And I
And
think
now-
the diabetes stuff, like what you're saying, is why the target changing. In diabetes, we used to be okay with the LDL of less than 100.
Correct.
But what the data clearly showed over the last 5 years, and it has nothing to do with pharma industry making money, okay, because these drugs are now cheap, they're generic, nobody cares about money, they're very cheap drugs. The data clearly showed that people who had LDL between 70 to 100 had a higher risk of stroke and heart attacks. But when you kept their LDL less than 70, they had a lower risk of heart attack. And to my own story, my whole story is about LDL. And like I told you, I've lived a healthy lifestyle all my life, never eating fat, doing exercise for 25 years now, and very less stress in first 20 years of my life. My only thing was menopause increased my LDL, which is a natural. You're not going to change that. Every woman gets LDL increased by 10, 20, 30, 40 points after menopause. And it can happen in 1 year. It can happen in 5 years. And my LDL went from 70 to 140, slowly and slowly, over 10 years. And my doctor was telling me at 110, 120, hey, let's put you on a statin. And I said, I'm healthy. I'm a diabetologist. I know this data. At that time, the LDL of 70 was not out. Okay.
Yeah.
And by the time my LDL was 140, I already had heart disease. I had chest pain in the middle of Mukteshwar hike. And literally, I would not have made it,
Yeah.
honestly. So it's an anecdote, I'm not saying. But when we looked at the data, it is not an anecdote. It is actually the data. And that's why for diabetes last year, ADA came up with the guidelines that every diabetic needs to have an LDL of less than 70. And because of my heart disease, I'm on the highest dose of statin.
Got it.
And my LDL is now 53 and 54. And luckily, I only had one blockage 4 years ago, not 4, 5 years ago. And my blockage has not changed. And my goal is to not get a stent.
Of course.
So the only thing I changed in the middle of everything else was a statin. So do I trust the statin is good for me, or do I not trust the statin is good?
Yeah, but
Then that is the
Yeah.
data out there, not just my anecdotes.
Yeah, I think again, I would maybe rephrase a little bit. I think I can speak for myself, right? Like I am very pro medicine in the sense that, you know, having grown up,
yes,
having seen kind of the impact of vaccinations and the impact of just medication as a whole, I think one of the advantages is the wrong word, but I think one of the realities of living in a low per capita society in general is that you don't have the privilege of saying silly things about stuff like vaccines and stuff like that, because your access to disease and sickness is just a lot more upfront, right? Like in general, America now can say a lot more stuff. Obviously, 80 years ago when there's polio everywhere, people are not complaining about the polio vaccine. And so I get that. What I was trying to figure out is how do we, because using an analogy, learning to fish is fine. It's just really choppy waters.
it is.
And
not easy.
None of us are fishermen.
Yep.
And so you have so much going on that I just really want to trust you,
It's hard.
right? Like I really don't want to fish.
Yep.
Right. I just want to do my thing and just listen to a couple of people. And if I can get to it, like honestly, that's kind of what happened with the COVID vaccine.
Yes.
Right. Like most of us are you trust your doctors, you like your doctors. I can tell you as a developer, respect levels, doctors significantly higher than real estate developer. Right. So in general, people want to trust. And one of the problems with that is then when you hear, we've heard anecdotes of people getting stents when they didn't need them, or
Yes.
overly medicated. And so
It's
that
true, by the way.
yes, I know. It just happened to my dad's friend, and he was going for a bypass, and then it was just it's just all sorts of medical malpractice, and you guys have spoken about that as well. So can you give us a little bit of your insight on that aspect of it, sort of in the interest of being honest and fair with everybody, right? How does that happen? Why does that happen? And how can I, as a patient, look out for signs of medical malpractice? Or, when do I put my antennas up?
Yes.
I think that is one of the most insightful pieces of our dialogue today, probably. And I'll tell you why. I'd say it somewhat dramatically to make the point. I'd say, don't trust your doctor.
Okay.
Absolutely. I want my patients not to trust me. I want my patients to push back on me. That's my best patient, right?
Yeah.
Which tells me that my patient is going out there and learning how to fish. Because I'll tell you today, right? Certainly in the Indian context, this is not criticism of physicians. This is the ground reality.
Correct.
Physicians are trained to treat disease, and there is a heck of a lot of disease and a heck of a lot of population in the country.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, Rushank, next person, next person, next person. 80% of the time, they're playing in a space that they are treating with A, B, C, D, and E. And it's a fairly cookie-cutter approach of getting stuff done. Again, not criticism. If I was in those shoes today, I'd be doing that, because otherwise there'd be no way I could get through my day and get home to my family, right? But no, the reason I mentioned that in such a dramatic way is because if you knew that that was the ground reality, I'll give you a little story. One time, I had just gone to the United States, and I came back after about 3 years, and, newly minted with all the Western knowledge and so on. And then my buddies are sitting in a little town in UP practicing. So I went to meet this guy. He's a good friend. He used to be my medical school buddy. And I'm sitting in his waiting room, and there are about 50 people crowded in that waiting room. And I said to him, so he would touch someone's pulse, he would do this, he would give someone this, he would give someone that. This guy trained with me in internal medicine, MD in medicine, along with me. So I said, tell me, how do you figure out what's going on with this guy? I take about 30 minutes to figure this out. So he goes, Nirmal, अगर मैंने उसको 5 मिनट लगा दिया हो तो वो सोचेगा डॉक्टर कुछ आता नहीं है. So I can't spend more than 5 minutes with him, or I wouldn't be able to get it done. My point simply is, I strongly urge people not to trust your doctor, because there is no way in heck. Doctors are not God. They don't know everything. They're learning. They're trying to navigate through the day the best they can. They're also prone to influences like any other human beings are. So the guy who's doing 50 stents in a day and in large corporate hospital where they have to make ends meet, right? I say, don't trust him. Don't trust me when I talk to you. I would go back and look up the statin data. I'd say, this is how I look up the statin data. So I continue to tell people, we want shortcuts as consumers. My doctor, typically in India, when I go to someone, they say, I went to the best cardiologist. How the heck do you know he's the best cardiologist compared to who? Right?
Yeah.
Who told you he's the best? Oh, my friend told me. So does that make him the best? I've seen some of the best taking some of the biggest shortcuts known to man. And if a human being takes a shortcut, he's going to go wrong. I can be the best, the smartest guy in town.
Yeah.
But it's medicine is detective work. You put two and two and two together and then say Rushank has ABC. So there is no best guy. I'm struggling just like you are struggling in your job, or Renu is struggling in her job. That's what makes me humble, and that's what makes me learn everything. So I want to depend on you to do some of the research to say, Nirmal, what do you mean I want to take statin? I don't want to take a statin. Tell me why you want me to take it. Show me the data. That's how I want you to be as an informed consumer.
But even now, when I see patients in my practice, I mean, I always tell them at age 30, I knew everything about everything, every disease. At age 60, I don't know anything about disease because there's so much more information that comes out every single day. And I'm very humble in saying to my patients, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to this question, but let me research and get back to you. Like, so I'm not going to say completely mistrust your doctor, but again, I think what the point you're making here is you have to be an informed consumer yourself. So like when I do the diabetes data, right? All the Ayurvedic medicines, all the homeopathy medicines, they talk a lot about plants, and I'm nothing wrong with that. So I look at the plant data because a lot of my Indian patients don't want to take metformin, don't want to take Ozempic, and they're diabetic. So I have done a lot of research, and there are actually 80 plants which has been studied
Sure.
to improve sugars.
Yeah.
And that includes from Karela to aloe vera to apple cider vinegar, and you name it, and berberine. Some of them have decent data. The problem is that the study was on 300 patients or 200 patients or 100 patients for 3 months to 6 months, while metformin has data on 120,000 patients for 5 years.
Yeah.
So I do tell them, by all means, take it. If your sugar is 120 to 130, you may be able to get it down to less than 100 because the average drop of sugar is 12 points
Sure.
in the data. So yes, by all means, take it. But if you have a glucose of 300 to 400, I'm sorry, it is not going to work for you.
Yeah, and just on that point, I think one of the things people misunderstand about ancient Indian knowledge, this is again just my personal opinion, is that it was very experimental and it was always supposed to evolve.
Yes.
I don't think the idea was that this is the final step. And so I think sometimes people just
I think
mistake
they
those
do. And I think that historically, we have a very, very strong, both nostalgic and a visceral connection to our roots. That
Yeah.
somehow, that's the gospel. That's the ultimate.
But I
wisdom.
think it's more the what's left of the roots rather than the thought behind that,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Like so much of our, because we're a very old civilization, and there's evolution in 14,000 years or however many years. Well, that's a whole different. So coming back to what you said about doctors and trust. What is your thought? And this is a general question, not very specific, but what do you think about taking second opinions, right? When sometimes that gets more confusing, sometimes that's harmful, right? How would you do? Did you take a second opinion when you had to take statin? How do you approach those kind of things, or you tell your friends or family?
So I think that's how the documentary started. Because when I looked at statin data in South Asians, much different than Americans. Because I wasn't treating my patients for an LDL of 120 based on the American data. And when I started looking at South Asian data, oh my gosh, we are different. We die from heart attack 10 years earlier. We get diabetes 10 years earlier, and we have a lot more reasons to get that. So that's when I realized, okay, the data is out there, but I don't know about it. So at that point, I didn't have a question about statin because I was a doctor myself and I did. But I had an autoimmune disease 10 years earlier, and the local doctors were treating me, and it was helping me, partially not helping me.
Yeah.
So what we did was we looked at Up to Date, where people write chapters, and we found the expert in the field. And I said, I want a second opinion. I don't want to trust this doctor who's here because he may not be the expert. He's doing everything right, but it's not helping me. We both flew to a completely different state in Colorado, found that research guy, talked to him, and I'm living because of him.
Yeah.
I would have died. So that was a second opinion, right?
Okay.
If I had not taken a second opinion at that time and continued to believe what was happening locally, I probably wouldn't be alive today.
How did you find your second doctor? How does one go about finding a second opinion that can add value to the first one?
Yeah. So in our case, and this was now what, 8-9 years ago?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. So things were different. Things have become easier now.
Yeah.
But back then, as a physician, we had a couple of resources. One of them called Up to Date. It's a software where you can look at chapters written by someone. So let's say there is an esoteric disease. I have a weird genetic disease.
Okay.
And then you look up the chapter. Typically, people are invited to write chapters
Okay.
when they're experts, right? So there are
Sure.
3 people who've written this chapter on Renu's condition at that point.
Okay.
So I said, well, let me make a random call to the first person on that list. And I looked up, thankfully, you can look up their credentials.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, I wrote a cold email to him saying, I want a second opinion. One thing led to the other, and we saw him. Now to the question of how do you do that as a general layperson?
Public.
Today, that has become very, very different because today you can literally type into ChatGPT to say, okay, here's the disease. Tell me the top 10 articles published on this disease in the past, make up a number, 5 years, 10 years, 6 years, and make sure the article has at least 200 patients or 2,000 patients, depending on the case might be.
Got it.
That's what I meant becoming the CEO of your own health. And there are people now, non-physicians, doing this for themselves, right? So you would then do that, and then let's say you come up with 3 articles, and you look those up, and you go, okay, so let me see where these people come from. And every article gives you where they come from.
There's an author.
So what you could also do is, so that's anyone, right?
Yeah.
ChatGPT. Then there's another one, which is, I believe, and I could be slightly off on this one. So open evidence or open.
We'll do research on that.
Yeah, open. So
Yeah.
what I didn't know is whether that's, I had signed up as a physician. So what I don't know is whether that works for a layperson as
Understood.
well or not.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't quote that, but I would definitely quote, I use ChatGPT all the time.
Okay.
And the pro version of it, where you can then go into the articles. And typically, even if you don't write the articles, if I said, show me
But
evidence.
the 10 experts in the field based on medical evidence.
Yeah.
I would always say
Understood.
that.
Yeah.
So,
So then-
because experts could be anyone. But if you say medical evidence, which means they have actually done the evidence and research. And open AI, that's what I do. With ChatGPT, sometimes I don't find medical evidence because it also goes through Google and other part of internet.
Yeah.
But open AI will give you the relevance of articles.
Open evidence. Yeah.
Open
evidence,
evidence. Yeah, and that's what I do all the time. So
Yeah.
I go to ChatGPT, then take that message, go to OpenAI, because the question which are asked to us all the time in our WhatsApp group, we actually code an article, and
Understood.
that's our goal, is
So,
to give medical evidence.
But back to the next step in that, every article that you then pull up, by definition, every scientific article quoted in a medical journal, Lancet, BMJ, anywhere, will have the authors and will have their affiliations. And I'll tell you one thing, this is a little secret that
Sure.
maybe everyone should know.
Yeah.
Doctors who publish love to hear from people.
Of course. Yeah, I got it.
Now,
Yeah.
I am so close to this research.
Yeah.
I've done this I've spent 30 years
Yeah.
doing this. When someone writes to me saying, hey, can you tell me more about this? I respond to it. This is not like a celebrity who doesn't respond.
Yeah.
So people respond. So I reached out to Kevin, in this case, a physician called Kevin Brown. I reached out to him, and Kevin said, absolutely happy to see you guys. Before we knew, we were in Colorado getting worked up for it.
And I got into an experimental drug protocol,
Okay.
which saved my life.
Yep.
Speaking of AI, slightly dystopian question, but do you think moving forward, medicine and doctors and experts is going to be reserved for the rich? And in many ways, people without the means are going to be stuck with the doctor's version of a chatbot. How do we because, it's ultimately hospitals and clinics, even clinics
Yeah.
are being now private equity owned.
Yes.
And it started in America, and good or bad, most of these things then flow back because it's the same private equity guys, same Brookfield, same, is that something you guys see happening? Which is that, this becomes medicine becomes chatbot based almost?
Yeah, personally, I don't think it's so much of a function of rich, poor, access, and so on, although it might be. Not sure whether that will be the case. But the primary concern with your question is a very valid one, right? And honestly, as sitting here today in 2026, I wish I had a clear answer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't. What I do know is, I do know in all humility that when I'm beginning to put things into search engines that are AI based, I'm finding that numerous times they're beating me to it, right? Meaning
Yeah.
they are beating me to
The
the
right
best
answer,
available
best
evidence.
answer.
So I'll give you an example. If you asked me, even in my own specialty, right?
Yeah.
There have been instances when, in the past, when people asked me a question, hey, Nirmal, what would you do about blank disease
Sure.
or this condition that
Yeah.
I have here? In order to look good and look smart, I tell you the answer that I thought was the best, in my opinion,
Sure.
based on my experience, based on my research, based on whatever. What I've been increasingly doing, being humbled by what I've been finding, is that I have gone to research-based engines and looked at the highest available new data, and at least 30% of the time I'm off.
All right. So then let me ask you this question in a different way. Assuming everyone is in-house MD and has access to all these esoteric diseases,
Yep.
and knowing how AI works currently a little bit, which is what you said, comparing,
Yep.
collating,
All the data.
would we be better off in general if the research was left to the humans and the diagnosis was left to an AI, but like a non-biased, practical AI? Would that net give better results?
I believe so. I believe so because I think even researchers now are actually taking help of AI in
So,
the research part
like
as
my
well.
blood tests
Yes.
and MRIs,
Yes.
I have found AI far more useful
Yes.
to me.
Yeah.
We're doing a little bit. I just the conversation we started with genetic testing. I did mine.
Yeah.
To see what foods I can eat, and that kind of genetic testing. It's super expensive right now, but
Yeah.
it can tell you. And so, for example, it told me not suited to eat legumes and beans, for example, right? And I kind of put that whole result into Gemini and ChatGPT, and it went over that data and answered my questions in such detail. And I had a 20-minute appointment with the doctor, right? So 20 minutes versus whatever.
Yes.
And then it took it one step further and created a diet plan for me.
Yep.
Taking into account, I'm vegetarian and X and Y, and I don't like mushrooms and so on and so forth. So do you think that then is almost going to become the second opinion is almost, or the first opinion is almost always going to be then this sort of neutral AI?
So here's the caveat with that. So here's what we struggle with that. And I've had people, really smart people, do this as highly informed consumers. We have a guy who runs a WhatsApp group from California.
Mhm.
Super sharp IT guy. He's an IIT alum and does this now out of the goodness of his heart for a lot of people. So sharp as heck, significantly smarter than I ever will be. The problem is, as you well know, is everything depends, now using AI terminology for a minute,
Yeah.
everything depends on the prompt that you're going to put in. So the whole world is going to revolve around prompt engineering and what you put in. So if I'll use an extreme example, if the prompt is wrong, the answer will be
It's
wrong.
going to be wrong.
Yeah.
So as an example, if you are looking at one slice of a broader question, the slice is, are legumes good for me? Making this up. It'll do the very best it can to find you the answer. Is that good for you? But if I then haven't put in, again, using an extreme example, oh, by the way, it'll typically ask you, are you a diabetic?
Yeah.
Tell me more, whatever. But if you didn't ask it 5 other sub-questions related to that, and secondly, if you also didn't ask it to tell you real outcomes data, if people who ate legumes versus those who didn't, was there a real outcome difference? It'll flounder. It'll tell you, it'll do all these things to your mitochondria that will make you better. But when you then turn around and say, did it make real people better tomorrow morning? It'll not tell you that. It won't lie to you, but it won't tell you that.
So then would all doctors need to be prompt engineers?
Absolutely.
Probably.
That's my point. My point is that as doctors, like we've always done, we need to say to ourselves that this is a new tool. This is a new learning. So I am re-educating myself entirely on that process. Most doctors don't
No, but
today.
we do that though. I mean, and I'm seeing patients, I have open evidence open. And if somebody asks me a question where I don't have an answer, okay, let me look for the medical evidence right now.
Okay.
In
I'll
real
tell
time.
you. And real
She does
time,
that in real time.
because I still see patients. And I will tell them in the next, I'll look up my cell phone, I'll open up and I'll do the open evidence and literally gives you answer in 30 seconds to 1 minute.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
And I tell them, and if I don't get the answer right away, if I'm more confused, then I'll tell them, okay, I'll just send you a message right after we finish because I'll have the answer to that.
Yeah.
But I don't make up an answer to say, hey, no, this is good or bad for you.
Yeah.
Because everybody has their own genetic, everybody has their own things in mind which they want to know the answer of.
So I
And
think that
AI
there'll be
is a tool for the doctors, in my opinion.
absolutely. And I think what's now to what I think is the bottom line to that answer, I believe, and I go by 30 years ago or whatever time it was when MRIs came out, people thought neurologists would go out of business.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest reasons for referrals to neurologists today are MRI. So I think what will happen is with AI, it'll be the same. It'll be that people will get super sharp with finding answers to about 60% of things.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, but wait a minute.
Yeah.
So-and-so got hurt by this process, and so here got hurt by this process. Let me ask a doctor to decipher this for me. So doctors will begin to find themselves with a new hat to decipher all of this
Like
stuff.
a second opinion
Like
after
a second opinion after AI.
Yeah.
And I think it'll become a paradigm shift, but they will always have the years of learning behind them to be able to say, yeah, but I have to look at life differently. And to me, that's the single most important thing, that as a physician, they come humble to say, heck, I don't know where this is leading me. Let me look it up.
And it's
But I
almost
think that's why the difference is a healer, right? When we talk
Yeah,
about the healer.
exactly.
So I have now 35 years of experience with diabetes. And I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly of all. And I'm not saying that, you get better as the time goes by. No, you don't. But I'm humble enough to say that, I may not know enough about this, but I've seen enough of it. So in my opinion, this might work better for you. And I think that's where the healing part comes in. Like I'll tell you, this is my story. I'm humble enough to share my story with them.
Yeah.
And they connect with it. Like, this is a guy, it's a doctor who's talking to me like she's a patient.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the healing part comes in,
And I think
which
that's all.
an AI cannot do.
And I think in many ways, that's all what people kind of expect is honesty.
Yes, exactly.
That helps a lot.
You spend 10 minutes with them in a nicer way.
Yeah.
Not just, okay, you do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then tell them, you know what, this 4 may be very difficult.
Yeah.
So let's focus on this. Like I have 16 years old girls who are going to prom, have type 1 diabetes and have an insulin pump,
Yeah.
right? I spend half an hour with them talking about how to hide that pump so they can have a fun time in prom.
Yeah.
I don't talk about their sugar because that's not where they came from.
And they know.
They tell me, I'm going to take the pump off because I want nobody else to see me in that tight dress. And I don't want to show I'm a diabetic. So my whole conversation is, how do you hide that pump? Because if you take that pump away, your sugar is going to 500.
Yeah.
And so that's a healing part, right? Because you're connecting with them emotionally, which an AI cannot do.
Yeah. And like I said, I think kind of in this conversation, like you said, I think it may end up being that more than the patients being prompt engineers, the doctors
will.
and the AI doesn't judge, right? So you don't have to call another doctor. You can do the research, be better with your patient without sort of a necessary negative.
Yeah.
And also
no
the
judgment.
patient become better patient.
Yeah.
You go with your research. I tell them, do your research, come back to me, and then we have a dialogue. Not like, I said this, you do this. That's not the time anymore.
You mentioned diabetes, and kind of just a side point. There's been a lot of research and documentation and certain positive outcomes. You think we can cure it?
Diabetes?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Okay.
But we can make it as better as we can.
possible.
Again, this is an humble answer.
Yeah.
Type 1, there's no cure because you have antibodies and they're gone.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there's no cure now. Gene changes, yes. Stem cell implantation, yes. Islet cell transplantation, yes.
Sure.
So we may cure with that, but not in a routine way.
Yeah.
Type 2 diabetes, though, I do say only 10% is genetics.
Yeah.
90% is still lifestyle. So you can control it to as close as possible that you have a normal glucose. And to me, that's cure.
I'm going to go a little bit to your start. And I know we've done the documentary on the heart. And so, a lot of the focus has been that on infectious diseases, right? Almost lost in all of that is obviously one of the kind of reasons podcasts as an industry blew up and all of that, because we were all home for a couple of years. What was COVID as we now that have years of data on it, relatively speaking? Why did we panic? Was the panic justified now that we have that information? What's the next one? How is this because we seem to get one every 100 years. And so, because we read about the Spanish flu and then COVID, and then kind of, the impact of gain of function research and just research in general on all of this, right? Like the kind of double-edged sword nature of all of that. But more importantly, again, what was it and did we need to panic? That's the genesis of the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that COVID, looking back, and maybe if you could summarize the learnings, I think that a lot of what was done and in the way that it was done was obviously a function of a very large number of deaths in a very, very short amount of time. And if you look at it purely from a humanistic perspective, each one of us, I'm sure you could rattle off a few, I could rattle off a few. In our families, we've had people who passed away very untimely and very, very young. And if you're one of those people, if you look at it through their lens, right, no amount of care was good enough, no amount of care was large enough, no amount of precautions were unreasonable, right? So if you're in that boat, that's what it was. As an infectious disease physician, as I was seeing it unfold, I saw, if you were to look at it from a high-level perspective, there was a crossover between two things. On the one hand, there was what we would call best available public health science that says, I've seen this in the context of TB, I've seen this in the context of influenza, I've seen this in the context of cholera, I've seen this in the context of plague, and I'm going to use those principles to avoid death right now because people are dying like flies right now. The problem was when you put those into place, by definition, public health teaches you that freedom has to suffer as a result of that. Because if you don't, normally, if I told you, Rushank, take this medicine, and you say no, the only one person you're impacting is you.
Yeah.
But if I told you, Rushank, wear a mask, because you're going to protect not only yourself from others, but you are going to prevent deaths from happening elsewhere, I almost have to force you to wear a mask. Because if you don't wear a mask, then other people might die. So historically, in diseases like TB, we were always taught that freedom took a backseat against public health, greater good, so on. Most of the conflicts that happened in that context occurred because of the intersection of these two. So people said, and particularly in the West, people said, you can't take my freedom away, and they rebelled, and many of them rebelled, and so on and so forth. Now that then takes us to a more philosophic question. What might have happened if we allowed everything to go by just the way it was and not done anything about it? Unfortunately, those advocates who talk about, well, there would have become a certain amount of herd immunity and so on and so forth, in the context of an acute and lethal infectious disease, it doesn't work that way. It's very hard to get herd immunity unless you were willing to risk millions more lives. And like I said in the beginning, if you're one of those who've lost a 30-year-old sister, you don't, even that 1% is 100% mortality.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the dilemma. Now, on the vaccine issue, things have been more subtle. We always were passionate advocates of the vaccine, saying, you know what, we don't know everything about it. We'll deal with the consequences in the long term. Right now, my sole purpose is to save lives. And there was reasonably good data in a very short period of time that vaccines worked. What we didn't have, which I think people were, from a public health standpoint, were standing on the rooftops and saying that they're 100% safe, which they couldn't have said they're 100% safe. That's where people felt they were misled. People felt, you know what, how the heck can they say this is 100% safe when
Also with 9 months of data,
with 9 months of
as
data.
opposed to 10 years of data
And
with
the
Ozempic.
other thing was, I think what I'll tell you for myself, took the vaccine, sort of happy to take the vaccine and stuff like that. But there was a feeling that me taking the vaccine would prevent the spread.
Mhm.
And so you were almost doing it for public safety.
Yes.
And when the feeling came out that everyone knew that's not what was going to happen, then it just felt odd.
Yep.
Because it was just amazing. I was doing something for what I thought would help my parents, and and so I behaved almost reckless post the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that wasn't the case and I was aware, maybe I take it, maybe I don't take it. But I think my behavior is not as reckless, for lack of a better word. And so
I think that is true. Also, similar to what I described in the boat of people dying from COVID,
Yeah.
there are also people in the vaccine bucket that I've seen numerous patients who would swear by the fact that the vaccine caused them right after the vaccine, that they got side effects that have to do with broadly that might be called long COVID type symptoms.
Yeah.
But in reality, we don't know. Some people felt weird neurologically for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. And this is where we get back to the start of our conversation today, which is where we were not willing to say to people at that point that I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, and to the other point on that vaccine is that, and love to have your opinion on just in general, what is mRNA? Why is it so new? Why is that the way we could have solved it? There's an Indian vaccine that was just based on the dead virus.
Yes.
Why not stick to the 100-year-old whatever method of dead virus? Why go into this mRNA concept?
Yeah, I think what happens is, I'll be honest with you, the reality was that there was a race to the end, a rapid race that said, you know what, I've got to get something out that'll save people. And I felt that the speed at which that happened was creditable. If it hadn't happened,
I mean,
we would have. So,
yeah.
and the only kind of way, and the fact is, in most instances, historically,
Yeah.
because of more resources, the West kind of takes over. And they say, I know what to do. I have the money. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And places like India with superb resources and smartness of brains and so on, just by lack of resources takes a little bit of a backseat. Had the ground been level, right? Either way, you could have gotten to the finish.
Yeah.
Except the Mercks of the world and others had already set on a path that this was happening. And in research, when you're on a path, in this case, mRNA vaccines, when you're on a path, the fastest one who can get there first, and if you're on it, you never want to say, I want to go to a different way, because that's the fastest way.
And
to
in
get.
general, what's the advantage of an mRNA vaccine moving forward? Nothing to do with COVID, just in
Just active immunity, just very active
Okay.
immunity.
But why is that better than
Dead virus
than
vaccine.
our traditional, why did we need a different delivery method, if that's the right word for it?
Yeah. Well, it's not even a delivery method. It's the fundamental way the vaccine works.
Yeah.
And historically, when you look at killed virus vaccines or killed vaccines in general, there is a certain amount of, with live virus vaccines, the quality of the immunity is somewhat better. However, when you look at now with vaccines of other types, whether it be pneumococcal vaccines or it be influenza vaccines, more and more data is coming out that depending on which vaccine it is, both may have equivalent results given the primary circumstance. We didn't know that then. And it just so happened that the mRNA vaccine was moving ahead faster.
Yes.
So it got there faster. And then others came out that were probably
Perfectly
just
the
as
same.
good.
Yeah.
So that's how it was.
As we kind of close this, there's a couple of, I think, public service questions that I would like to ask. Maybe not as serious, sometimes serious, but definitely people have interest in. We were discussing this kind of offline. But, the aesthetic is a very important part of fitness. People want to look good.
Yes.
And they kind of feel better if they look good. If clothes fit, if shoes
Absolutely.
fit,
Absolutely.
things like that. And we always had this feeling that we're genetically predisposed to being aesthetically unfit. The brown body, right? We have, you mentioned this, like, you're born with a little more gut fat.
Yes.
Postpartum Indian women maybe find it harder to, or South Asian women find it harder to lose fat than maybe European or sort of North American counterparts. Is that purely anecdotal? Is that based in any facts? And if it is, are there medicated or non-medicated solutions to that?
So a couple of things. I think just start from the pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because the whole baby fat and all that starts in pregnancy.
Right.
And again, that's a lifestyle thing, not a genetic thing. That gestational diabetes, which is the pregnancy and diabetes, is happening much more in South Asian women than our Western counterparts. While we have the data 5 to 10% or 6%, we have up to 20% women.
And you're saying that is lifestyle,
Gestational diabetes, not genetic, that's
Okay.
lifestyle. Because more women are now obese going into pregnancy.
Got it.
More shift workers, so the stress, the cortisol levels being higher, putting more fat. So that's all playing a role into it. Dual jobs, right? So up to 20%, which is 1 out of 5 women, can be gestational diabetes. As a part of gestational diabetes means you have low insulin sensitivity and you make more insulin. The more insulin means more growth hormone, the more appetite, the more fat, the more weight. So we generally gain more weight. And then it's very hard to lose weight because of some of our social aspects.
Yeah.
And some of that is inherent genes, which is the visceral fat is much higher, which is much harder to lose even with exercise. But the two things which also go against us is, number one, you're eating for two. So I don't think in Western part they give you panjiri laddus and all that good stuff. You have to have desi ghee, you have to have anjiri laddu, you have to have milk 3 times more, and you have to have the regular fat milk. You can't have skim milk, which is completely wrong. There's no data or evidence about that. We all know that desi ghee is saturated fat, and fat gives you much more calories than your protein and carbs. So you're going to put more fat on. You're going to difficulty losing weight. So that's number one concern. Number two, I think in our culture, it is advertised taking rest is better than exercise. So we don't tell women after postpartum, hey, start exercise tomorrow. No, take it easy for 6 weeks. Ye mat karo, don't do that. Again, that is changing fast with education. So we have both the components of increased food and lack of exercise. And the third thing which is happening is the PCOS, which we talked about. The more women are developing PCOS, which means you have higher insulin resistance, which is much harder to lose even as a postpartum. And I think there's another component of it. Autoimmune thyroid disease. Because of the iodine deficiency for the longest time in our country, we have actually a postpartum thyroiditis, which is much more common in South Asian women. Again, that could be genetic, that could be the antibodies you persist with and you have. Again, in Western counterparts, somewhere up to 3 to 9% of women get postpartum thyroiditis, which means your thyroid goes under.
Got it.
And that's what causes the high TSH, again, difficult to lose weight. So that is the 4 components of difficulty losing weight postpartum. So we don't look as good. And then once that cycle starts, I think you're on a wrong path. I just can't do it. Why should I do it? And I think that's where we were talking about boot camps, right?
Yeah.
So we did a boot camp for diabetes during COVID because people couldn't come. Their A1C were rising because they were sitting at home not doing exercise. So we did virtual classes with them for rapidly escalating classes. Like every week, you would talk to somebody for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. One side diet, one side exercise. So we sort of were talking to them, to our diabetic patients on both sides. And we did this boot camp for 12 weeks.
Got it.
And see what the results would be. The good part was in COVID, they didn't have to come.
Yeah.
So nobody would come and pay weekly visits
Yeah.
and, it's hard. What we were able to show very quickly, that in 12 weeks, not only we were able to have them lose weight, they improved their lifestyle and their diabetes improved because this was only for diabetes. So yes, if somebody comes to me and tells me, hey, I really have my wedding in 3 months and I want to look good and I want to be thin, I want to be good. I have no problem. Hey, okay, I'm happy to give you Ozempic to lose weight, provided you are doing the lifestyle. I will never give medications to anyone who doesn't follow a good diet and exercise. So that's my first principle. But yes, if I give you, I'm not going to give you the highest dose. Let's get you started on a weight journey. Yes, I want you to look good in 3 to 4 months, but my journey with you will not stop there. So there's nothing wrong if I'm eating 1500 calorie diet and I'm not losing weight and I really want to shed 20 pounds. There's no harm in taking something for small term.
I think one
It's not
clarification, Renu, just to make sure, because I know we were talking to someone just a couple of days ago, is that all of what you said applies to people. If you're using a weight loss drug, you have to have BMI criteria.
Yes, you have to have. Like,
you
I
can't
won't give
be-
you if your weight.
I mean, if
BMI.
Rushank says, "Hey, listen, I want to look, I want to lose shed 10 pounds
Yeah.
by Ozempic," Renu wouldn't dole out Ozempic
Yeah.
to you. I think that's important.
No, but by people who come to me have a higher BMI
yeah.
because that's why they come to me. They don't come with a BMI of 25 or 26, and I won't even give it to them because I will go back with lifestyle, meditation, stress, cortisol, all of that we talk about. And I would give it to people who have a higher BMI. A short-term goal is not a bad thing. Okay, then after that, let's wean off Ozempic and let's go off on a limb of lifestyle and exercise and stress, which is meditation. I mean, I meditate every day, and
Yeah.
that started later.
Just
And
very quickly.
Yeah.
Is that something people you think can do successfully? Wean off Ozempic or Mounjaro and continue their positive lifestyle?
again, if they continue, if
Sure.
you're on a very high
Yeah.
dose, you may gain the weight back again.
Yeah.
No doubt. But if you're on a lower dosage, you can easily wean off. Okay? In a higher dose becomes difficult. But again, obesity is now considered a disease as opposed to just a lifestyle.
Yeah, of course.
It is a disease. So
Yeah.
like you take medicine for diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, you have to take it for that.
Got it. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time off. I'd encourage everyone to go and watch the documentary, The Brown Heart. It's on YouTube. It's free. There's the Joshi Health Foundation website. People can go. People can contribute. And again, thank you so much for taking the time off. It's been great talking to you guys. And
Thank you so
hopefully,
much. We appreciate the opportunity.
we'll see you guys again.
Yeah, thank
That's
you.
the only one thing I would say at
Yeah.
the end, that we have no financial gain.
Yeah, of
This
course.
is all
yeah.
philanthropy. Our only single mission is to save lives.